All right, man. We're hot, as they say. So in this day and age, I think with hearing on the news, and if you catch any of these YouTube videos out here or listen to popular quote unquote alternative media, you give the impression that a person can no longer make their way in this country, and that to coin a phrase, the American dream is no longer in existence. Um, I guess Robbie G and I we're going to talk about this today because our I wouldn't say that our experience is unique. Actually, far from it. But the two of us could we can actually lay testimony to you that the American dream is in fact not dead, and we'll present our arguments to the to to back that up and our experiences. And if it's something for you, it's something for you. If not, then yeah, what can we say, right?
You're asking for trouble on this one, buddy.
It troubles my middle name.
Comes comes from a guy who never mind. I mean, I'm just hearkening back to some of my first experiences on YouTube and the things that I got heat for, uh, which I was sort of sitting there wondering, I don't even know what's happening yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just being slaughtered by it's like, how dare you have a positive attitude?
Well, I remember the video that you had a bunch of talking hands videos where you're showing some nice stuff, but
Talking hands.
nothing crazy. Yeah, talking hands because it was little hands and you heard a voice, so obviously it was the hands talking. Then all of a sudden, I don't know if it was you showed your wallet or you were demonstrating some sort of a clip,
A money
and
clip, yeah,
yeah,
right.
so you just ran to your safe and grabbed a couple of folding bills, and you just so happened to have it just so happened to be hundreds.
Well, what else do you have in your safe?
Oh yeah,
I
if it
mean,
wasn't hundreds, why would they
seriously,
be in there?
did people put stacks of $1 bills in their safe? I never have cash on me, so I'm like, okay, I'm trying to demonstrate that this thing is a really good money clip, and
Yeah,
it's just like the most innocent thing in the world.
but it was kind of
And
the
I,
beginning of the end. You ended up polarizing your audience to the people that kissed your ass because they thought they could get something from you, or just jerked off to your situation, or the people that just resented, you know, what
well,
you
I
were
think
showing.
I think the thing that made me just kind of sort of baffled about all that, to your first point, was I'm just, maybe I've been asleep or something, but where, I mean, where is it written or said or whatever that somebody who is in possession of 10 $100 bills, is an elitist of some kind? I mean, it isn't really, something that would come to my mind. I wouldn't see, if I saw a video from somebody, or was standing next to somebody in the supermarket, and they pulled a money clip out of their pocket. It was kind of clear that maybe there might have been $1,000 there or whatever. I wouldn't go, oh my God, you know.
So,
I'm standing next to a member of the 1/100th of 1%. Let me ask this guy what he could do for me in my life. I mean, don't you think that's weird?
it's a little on the strange side, and doing what I do for a living, I see cash passing through, and I don't know. I don't when I see something. Me personally, this is just. I mean, maybe to get into perspectives a little bit earlier. When I see a pile of money, I don't think of the things that I could do with that pile of money that isn't mine. So take your $1,000 for example. I wouldn't look at your video of the money clip myself and imagine, oh my gosh, I could feed my family for 2 months with what you're just showing. That isn't the way that I was wired for some
I
reason.
mean, just to put it in perspective, because certainly 99% of people are probably listening to this that maybe not have remembered that or the situation or whatever, but it was a pocket knife.
That had a
Was
clip, right?
Well, I was just saying, here's this little, here's this little blade, a pocket knife, and because the knife shape itself was sort of not terribly wide, but we'll call it wide and flat, and it had a kind of a wide clip, on the knife. I was like, I kind of like this because I could have bills in here and I can open it, while the bills are in there, and that was the extent of the whole thing. So that was what was the catalyst for me actually going, okay, so what does somebody want to know about a money clip, right?
Yeah.
How many bills can you put in it? Is it, because that is concerned with money clips. I guess a lot of money clips would be designed. I'm not an expert on money clips, but I'm sure for some people who really like to carry a lot of cash with money clips, then they need a certain thing. That certainly wasn't the case with this.
Well, and I got to get on with money clips is I have this magnetic number, right? It's leather and it has magnets, and it may piss some people off to know, but on occasion I have enough money in that money clip to where the magnets no longer attract each other, Now I'm not going to sit here and say that it's always hundreds, but it's a wad of bills, and it just happens. It's one of those things that happens, and I don't mean it to offend or anything.
Yeah, but that's I think this is sort of poignant to what your video is about. That the core reaction that I got was that, well, it was as if I had pulled out the most enormous Chicago knot, and almost like sort of playing it coy, like, this video really isn't about a knife. It's about me showing you how fucking healed I am, right? Which is totally, not what it was, because if I was trying to do that, right, I probably would have gone after it a little bit more grandiose. I mean, good thing. But that was what sort of why was that the reaction that I got from not one person, but I think it was 3 people that really sort of drilled me pretty hard about that. I mean, one guy was basically like, "Oh, aren't you a big shot with $1,000?" And I was
but then they
laughing at that guy, and then another guy was like, "Do you know what an idiot you are for carrying hundreds on the outside of you're a fucking crime victim waiting to happen." And so I had another guy, and I don't remember what the third guy was, but it was just like, wow. I mean, that was kind of my first introduction to the YouTube audience, and it was an experience for sure. And that was kind of, I guess, my first clue that there are, I guess, more people than I thought that were out there that are so affected by what people have or what they perceive people have, or it just was amazing to me how close to the forefront that must have been in their minds to elicit that kind of response.
Well, the irony, of course, is if coming back to perspective, if you and I were to sit down right now and define, okay, what is or was, depending on how they want to look at it, the American dream, the way I understand it, and correct me if you see it different, is, okay, here I sit in this United States, this grand experiment of a government by the people, and I see somebody that has something that I do not have. My core definition of the American dream is if I desired that same thing that somebody else had, I would have the ability to work for it. And if I couldn't do it, then perhaps I could elevate my son or daughter to have that ability to do that. That core, you know what? I'm not able to beat you, but you know what? My son or daughter will be a better man or woman than I am, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that I think what happens when you use a catch-all term, like the American dream, a lot of times, I don't know how to say it, but it sort of ends up as fodder for people who want to interject or commingle other things that really don't have anything to do with it. Well, they'll start talking about oppressive government, or things that the IRS does, or taxation, or a lot. They'll start commingling a lot of different things. Say, no, you can't, because you have this barrier and this barrier and this barrier and this barrier. And I think I think how I think of it is just basically as simple as you said, that there's no class structure present that says that if you're from a certain street, a certain neighborhood, of a certain nationality. I mean, you don't even have to be from this country. You can, and I could name lots of examples of people who are foreign nationals living here that are tremendously successful. So if that isn't evidence that that pretty much anything is possible. But again, you can't commingle other stuff with it, right? It doesn't mean that you don't have to get fortunate. It doesn't mean that you don't have to be in the right place at the right time. It doesn't mean. There are caveats to everything. But
No, well, speaking,
unlike many countries in the world, there aren't, hard class structure or economic barriers that just, because there isn't enough prosperity at all that exists in the country beyond government officials for anybody. Stuff like that would preclude you from being financially successful.
well, as a quick aside, you and I, we wouldn't say that it doesn't happen where a person doesn't get an opportunity because they're a certain color or because they have a certain accent or from a different country. What we're saying is here in the United States, that's not game over. You can still find a way. Just because you hit that dead end, you keep looking.
And most of the people that I know that have had, any kind of success in that vein, the American dream type stuff, not only have had those types of barriers presented to them, but they continue to on a regular basis, as they do for me. I mean, even in my business now, I'm fairly frequently running into those types of barriers because of, maybe I didn't go to the right school. I don't have the right degrees. I don't have an MBA. I'm not a nuclear physicist. In the quant business, sometimes things like that are important to people.
Well, and we've got
as a pedigree.
We got into that in the past where, due to the location of your business, there was a certain reputation.
Right.
But obviously that had been
overcome.
overcome.
So much so that we had to overcome that barrier by basically creating an operation in Chicago.
But it didn't mean game over for you.
Well, no, but just like anything else, you got to hurdle and you got to jump over it. So, but I don't see that as a barrier to the American dream. I mean, even if something costs you a lot of money or a lot of time or whatever, I think pretty much anybody who's in any business, again, unless they're from that silver spoon place, which those people don't count because things are different for them. But for everybody else, it doesn't mean that there won't be barriers. But
we were talking about that off air. If we could talk about that silver spoon thing really quick. Some people could say, well, this person was born fortunate or whatever. Anybody can look for examples in the media and find people that have blown through $20-30 million in a single year. So that type of inheritance, I don't buy it that they're set. It can be mismanaged. It can be squandered.
Absolutely. But if your dad is a ditch digger, or your dad is a doctor, or your dad is a executive at a company, or whatever, all things being equal, none of those things is really going to determine whether you're going to be successful on your own or fail, and none of them are really going to be a barrier to entry. I mean, unless you're talking about you start getting into the elite and the silver spoon, then things are different. But if you kind of grew up on an average street in an average town like most of us did, or even a way less than average street like I did, nobody's really going to ask you about a lot of that stuff. They don't care. It's like, what can you produce? What can you do for me now? And for most of the time, you're going to be judged on those merits. And if you're not, I would say that if somebody isn't judging you on those merits, if you really are ambitious and passionate and great at what you do, and you're working for somebody else and they don't appreciate that, then you need to get the fuck out of there.
Find a place that will judge you on those merits.
Absolutely. And if you can't find a place that will judge you on those merits, then make your own place, and then nobody has to judge you on those merits.
Well, in my experience, I don't know how many of the I'm not psychic to the people watching this, but many business owners and many managers, I think people would be surprised that they came from humble beginnings. So if there is a person that would understand or not hold that against someone, it would be them. However, again, that merit will be critical. You're going to have to do something unique and great and maybe be the top 10% in your field.
Absolutely.
In ability. And
I would tell you too that, and this is no lie, if I hold up 10 fingers and I think about, the 10 people that I would sort of make a list of the 10 people that I most admire that have been successful in their business and in their own respective fields, including people that I don't even really know very well, but know well enough to know a little something about them. I can't think of any of them that are were coming from a privileged position. In fact, most of them were kind of about like I was, or maybe even worse in some cases. I mean, really from kind of the school of hard knocks, and I get maybe there's something to that. Maybe the more you've had the shit kicked out of you, the more tenacious you are, and that's part of it. It's a part of a recipe for success or something. But I don't know. I can't really be the judge on that. But it is remarkable enough to mention that a lot of people that I know that are wildly successful are. It's just to say they're regular people from a regular street with no particular advantages would be an understatement.
I would imagine if I were to come up with a theory on it, I would say that it's some sort of a blend of nature and nurture. There's going to be some of it that's just born into a person where they are genetically receptive to the things that happen in their life, and there's a certain amount of things in their life, and it's going to be a different mixture for everyone. But the end result, I think, will be the same, is that it produces a person who is a problem solver. A person who's faced with the barrier or a hurdle, like what we were talking about before, whatever that combination ended up that brought them to that point, they were the type of person that kept running and jumped or got through that barrier, found a way around it. Didn't look for a cop out, didn't look to quit. They set their sights on progress, and they didn't accept any other path than a solution. Whatever it was that made them that way, the ones that accomplish it are that way.
Yes, I agree.
Or smart enough to know their limitations and hire people who are that way.
Yes, that's another thing that I subscribe to. Try not to be the smartest guy in your company. Just surround yourself with greatness. That's always a good plan.
Was it? I recently heard, kind of as a comedic aside, if you find yourself the smartest person in the room, that means that the really smart people have already left, and you should run away.
You got that right. Definitely. And I think that's. I don't want to go off on that tangent, but that's another interesting dynamic for successful people that I know, is the ability to understand that what you just said, and to be selfless enough and to have their ego parked enough to welcome people who are smarter than you, and to not be threatened by them.
Well, it takes courage to admit weakness and limitations. However, if we don't find a way to compensate for our weakness and limitations, we may not be able to accomplish our goals, right?
Right. And every business needs a a gatekeeper, an orchestrator to, uh, and that in itself is a great skill and a talent that can't go overlooked. I mean, I know a lot of people who are successful in business, and that's really all they bring to the table. You know what I mean? They don't really have any particular technical expertise or anything, but they are just masterful at uh, finding the right people to be their partners and to get them excited about what they're doing, and to coordinate personalities uh, um, and make it so that everybody can find some sort of symbiosis with each other without having constant pissing contests that are unproductive. And that's a real skill to be a gatekeeper like that. And it's really one of the cornerstones of American business. I mean, some of the greatest well-known CEOs, in history have been just that. I mean, there really aren't anything in terms of they don't really have any other skill set other than to be masterful at the human condition and how to make all of those opposing forces, find a gelling point and make something great.
But I personally would never dare say that is a useless skill, because if you think about it, the top niche industries are the type that attract type A personalities, be it business, medical profession, you name it. I mean, these people have the innate ability to get type A personalities, which is the type of people you're going to need for these fields, and get people that are leadership minded to actually work together in a way.
Right.
It's a very interesting dynamic that still has a place.
Right. I agree.
So here we sit, you and I, and we're daring to say the American dream is still in existence. A few years ago, I'm lucky enough to be friends with this old Italian man. I mean, he's literally from Italy. I don't mean like he's an American Italian from Jersey that is into his heritage. I mean, this dude's from freaking, I don't know, where's the Pisa? Somewhere near Pisa. And I had mentioned something about the American dream, and this old man who comes up to my shoulder because he's European and I'm an American, so I stand a whole head and shoulder above the average person in the world.
Like that's got anything to do with it? I'm not from Europe, and you're 800 feet taller than I am. So.
Anyway, though, I get to talking about, because my daughter had just been born at this time, so wow, I guess that has actually been a little while ago now. But I say something about the American dream, and it was around this was around 2008, I guess, when things were tough, and I looked him dead in the eye and said, I look forward to my daughter growing up and doing her thing and finding her way in the world, and I mentioned something about the American dream, and this old man in his 70s points this knotted finger in my face, and he starts shaking. He gets really mad all of a sudden. He says, "Don't you fucking tell that to anybody. Don't you tell that to fucking lie about this a dream." And I'm like, what the fuck, man? I'm like, so let me get this straight. You come to my fucking country, and here I am talking to a 70-year-old man. What was your town like growing up? And he's like, oh, the most wealthiest person owned a bicycle or some shit like that, right?
Right.
Like he drove up there in a Jeep Grand Cherokee, but something in his life and something in his perspective led him to believe that something about this so-called American dream was gone. And I don't know. I didn't know if it broke my heart or what, because here's a person, because he's old and he's seen a lot of shit. I got respect for that to a point, and I wasn't sure. I really had to do some soul searching about it. And I think somewhere along the way, the American dream was sold as a chicken in every pot, a brick house for every single family, no matter what, with no regard to ability or merit. You know, as if it was
Well,
due because you're
well,
American.
yeah, maybe, but let's take it one step further.
Sure.
In my opinion, uh, what most people think of as the American dream is is not really what the American dream is. Typically, when you ask somebody about the American dream, they talk about the '50s. They talk about the post-war effort, and they talk about how, um, you know, um, try to figure out how to phrase this. But the basic notion of it is that it was easy. Okay, that's the main interest in it. If you really cut through all the stuff, it's not really that here's this land of opportunity. What they're really telling you about that period and what they admire about it is that you really didn't have to be particularly ambitious. You really didn't have to work hard. You really didn't have to, you know, uh, really put anything to the grindstone, and it was pretty much automatic that you were going to have a house and a picket fence and 2.2 kids, and it was going to be easy to pay for it.
But
right?
now,
So these words kind of come in there: easy, free, cheap, all other stuff, and so you start thinking about that, and you go, well, I mean, is that the definition of the American dream? Is, in other words, it's not America isn't anything that is positive or isn't anything that anybody would want to seek out or admire or want to be a part of if you actually have to make an effort and have some hardship. Then all bets are off. Then it sucks, which is kind of what a lot of people are saying.
you know what's the irony of it is, was it really easy for those people to do what they did in the 50s? I mean, these
Right.
people,
These people now know because they weren't there. They don't, they just
well,
see
in
it on
the middle class of that era that just got through fighting a fucking world war, they had also just lived through the Depression. These are the same people. It's not like they were born after the 30s. They would have had to been through the 30s to be of age in the 50s.
Right.
It's fucking math. They were here for the 20s and the fucking 30s.
Oh, and by the way, per capita debt to GDP was higher than it is now. Oops, did I just say that?
Well, here's an interesting story though. You know me, I'm a GM employee, and I was talking with a person from that era. This is a while back. My grandma's ex-husband, and he was saying, yeah, he always forgets that he told me that he's been a GM employee, right? And he's like, yeah, I used to make spark plugs for AC Delco. And here I was thinking, okay, yeah, you put them together, whatever. No, this guy, when he says he made spark plugs, he worked a lathe and was hand making spark plugs by hand with a lathe. You know, and he was getting whatever amount of dollar that equates to a ridiculous amount of dollars now. But my point is, the dude was fucking kicking ass. He was working hard.
Right.
I didn't mean to derail you there, but
No, I was done. I mean, I'm just.
but the idea that it was easy, I don't think it. I think it's easy to look back after somebody accomplishes something.
Well, I'm not saying it was easy.
No, certainly not. And I didn't mean to think that you
all
were.
I'm saying is that when you hear the keywords that these pessimists today that say that America's dead, the American dream is dead. If you ask them, or you usually don't have to, they're happy to do it on their own. But the keywords that they use to describe what the American dream is to them tends to include adjectives that denote that it was hugely accessible without a tremendous amount of effort. All you had to do was kind of just land here and be a regular guy, and the American dream was going to fall in your lap. Right? Those are the words that typically are used to describe this phenomenon called the American dream by those people. And I agree with you. I'm not saying that it was easy. No, I'm not saying every time in history has its own challenges, and until you've lived through it and had your own specific circumstances, nobody 30, 40 years from now is really going to tell you what it was like or what it wasn't like for anybody. But that's the difference to me, is that when I speak to people who have my mindset about what the American dream is, they don't use those terms. It's a different thing. They say, yeah, the American dream is alive, and isn't it great that you can really bust your ass and be passionate, and you can work 3 jobs if you have to do all this stuff, and that can help you crash through the barriers of entry, and isn't it great that you have the ability to do that, rather than, I'm so happy about the American dream because everything that I did fell in my lap.
Well, something that is easy is to look at the accomplishments of another and see the path that they went through and say, "Oh yeah, it was doable." But
Right.
if we go back to the start of our country, Jamestown's a good example. The people that originally settled here from Europe, uh, what they saw when they arrived on these shores, and anybody who's been in a rough area of natural wilderness in the United States could probably tell you, wasn't what what you would think. When Andrew Jackson went to Tennessee, it wasn't the Tennessee that we have now. That was a western frontier. Um, it was never easy. I'm going to just say it. It was never easy, and it never
I
is
agree.
easy.
I agree.
And I don't for a moment think that what lays in front of you and I as you and I move forward are necessarily the most difficult times in American history. I just don't believe that for an instant.
I don't either.
Especially the history. You take the 1960s with the fucking Cuban Missile Crisis, or the time when our country was pursuing this attitude of eugenics,
Right.
and elitism was taking hold. Holy
Right. Yeah,
shit!
exactly. Yeah. Problems with government, the
Oh yeah, I mean, if
press,
if
things
if
like
people
that.
want to
Nothing's
complain about the government now, I brought up Andrew Jackson earlier. What many people don't realize is if somebody wasn't from the Northeast for the first, I don't know, 50 or so years of our country's history, if somebody wasn't from the Northeast, you weren't getting shit.
right. Right.
It
Yeah.
was
Every
insane.
every decade has its own challenges for sure.
Yeah,
And some things will never change,
yeah,
like the inability of government to perform certain functions without stepping on anybody's toes, and I mean, we could. That's a whole other topic, of course, but um, just what the framework of American government is by its construction, and how that breeds exactly what continues to happen because of what it is, right?
yes.
But that's another topic.
So I mean, I think part of what what shapes my opinion of the American dream is of course my own experiences. Um, Both my wife and myself. Um, my wife, where she's at right now, she started there as the secretary, just the administrative assistant, as it's politically correctly called now. And her job now is facility administrator. So literally, my wife went from the lowest position at her place of employment to the highest. And if that isn't the American dream, I really can't tell you what is.
Right.
But further, I can tell you that it was not easy. While a lot of my friends were going out and buying new cars, we were going through school. I was putting my wife through RN school, and we were sacrificing at the time and driving around and paid off shitbox cars, and just paying our way along the way. It wasn't easy,
Yeah.
and
Sacrifice.
yes, and it
Yeah.
was it was trying on our relationship. There were emotions and breakdowns of communication and the things that happen when people are just worn out, and making the choice on who gets to eat lunch on a particular day is the point that we were at. And
Mhm.
but it happened, and we got through it, and here we are. The other part is me recently being promoted at work, um, to a department head. And man, I was in the shop for years, just paying my dues, fixing cars, working just flat commission, to where if I didn't have work, I didn't get paid. But that situation shaped my perspective on things like productivity, on value, on my time, how I would spend my time. But I didn't get a college degree. I don't have a college degree, and I'm a manager. In this day and age, it's 2013. I'm 37 years old and I'm a manager without a college degree. I just have a high school diploma. So it wasn't, that piece of it. Now, I'm not going to say that I could rule the world. There may be a point when I had education, but you know what, Rob? If I got to that point where I needed that piece of paper and I wanted it, you know what I'd do?
You'd go get it.
I'd go and fucking get it. I'd
Yeah.
I'd hit the books. I'd probably stare at some. No.
Yeah, we know what you'd say.
Yeah, I'd be the creepy old dude, but I'd
Yeah,
be
the
those.
lecture in the back of the classroom.
And it was hard. I leading up to this, with the stock stuff and everything else, and people who watch my channel know, the last few years I've been waking up at 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning, studying trading, studying the markets, and finally getting done with work and training at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And those are the days that I was putting in. So it wasn't easy. There wasn't an easy route. And I don't think.
Go back a little bit further, though.
Sure.
I mean, I know the current story, but what before that happened? I mean, did you, like, before you got married and stuff? Did you choose this initial career, and did you have to kind of come from, I don't know, having even more of a menial job to learning that skill?
Well,
Like automotives.
when I was growing up, my dad only has a high school diploma as well, and he got into the nuclear industry, and he ended up he started out as a mechanic, and we lived in this little single wide trailer while my dad worked 6 and 7 days a week, and his waking thought while he worked was to put me to college, and it was never an option for me growing up. And so I did everything that was expected of me. I took the college prep stuff in high school and everything else. And directly out of my senior year, my dad sent me to USF. Now, my dad isn't Daddy Warbucks. Remember, we were talking about the middle class people and where you come from and whatever. He was just breaking six figures. And but I dropped out and I decided to do my own thing and, just sort of I decided that, well, I'm pretty good with cars. My dad was a mechanic, so I'll fix cars. And but I couldn't just go into a shop and make good money at it. I had a couple of jobs at McDonald's and a couple of other places. Now, when I was in college and everything, I was always working. My summers off, I never didn't work, if that makes sense.
Right.
There was never a time where I sat back and my parents just took care of me. I mean, I got an allowance when I was in high school and everything else. But my summers off, I always worked. I drove a truck for Badcock Furniture for a while, delivering furniture. I got fired from McDonald's.
It's hard to do.
Yeah. Well, an interesting thing was at the time.
I worked there too, by the way.
Did you?
Yeah.
I was.
By the way, that reminds me. Speaking of McDonald's,
Yeah.
At my time at McDonald's, the really big deal, the gig that everything was part time. I mean, I'm going way back, but if you worked at the grill or worked out front, you got these sort of 3 and 4 hour shifts, at dinner time or whatever, when you're in high school. And the thing that everybody wanted, like the one most coveted gig in the store, was to be the maintenance man. and the reason is because the maintenance man was like the only job other than a management job, which you realistically weren't going to get as a high school kid unless you left school or whatever. But was to be the maintenance man because it was a 40-hour week and paid $4 an hour.
So you would
and
actually
that was like the greatest thing in the world, because if you could get that job over the summer, it was just like this amazing thing. It's like, oh my God, I'm gonna
So
be
it
able to
was
make $160
desirable.
a week.
It was desirable to get the job that had the hours and the position.
Right, right. And it was the dirtiest, filthiest job, cleaning out the grease traps and all of that stuff and the trash and the parking lot with the gum all over the place and it was like a majorly competitive thing amongst certain people in my time that worked at McDonald's to try to get that gig, and it was like you really had to, the manager really had to like you, because they knew, what a great gig it was and how everybody wanted it. So it's like you were a very important person in the store if you got that job. So and and the money, which seemed like a lot to us,
Oh yeah.
$4 an hour and a 40-hour week, man, that was just setting the world on fire compared to the $3.35, that you're going to get part time in the grill. So,
well,
those were the days.
My first shop job though was at a Firestone, more or less changing oil and doing alignments that I was given a shot at. I wasn't making quite the amount of money that I wanted to, so I continued to actually work at the Dairy Queen while I was working at the shop. So there I was working 7 days a week to make the amount of money that I wanted, yet never having time to spend it, obviously.
Right.
Was interesting to show how young I am. I don't know. There was the new Nintendo. This was back when the Nintendo 64 came out. It was a 64-bit gaming system, and I thought it would be fun to get one. So one particular evening after I got out of work, I had plenty of money at the time because I was working so much and I never had time to spend it. I bought this fucking Nintendo 64. It sat in the back seat of my car for 3 fucking weeks in the bag from the store that I bought it from. Because I was waking up, going to work, getting cleaned up, going to my next work, going home, going to bed. That was every day for me, And what my parents have done or where they came from, they've done well for themselves, but it never occurred to me to try to fleece off of them or to use anything that they had to my advantage. If anything, it was almost the contrary for me. I wanted to be out of my dad's shadow. That sounds dumb, but it's just how I felt and how I still feel. Let's say my parents somehow were successful enough to leave me with an inheritance. What is my waking thought? And I'm gonna probably win no friends on YouTube by quoting Ayn Rand, but in her character Santiago in Atlas Shrugged, a person who deserves an inheritance is one who doesn't need it.
Yeah, that's pretty true. That's pretty true.
But I mean, it's I don't know. I could imagine that some people will say, well, Ron, I mean, your dad and your folks were well off. Look, they sent you to college. No wonder you've done well. You'd have to, I guess they just have to take my word for it that failure is still possible if you come from my means.
No, it happens all the time. I mean, it happens all the time. Who your dad is. I mean, unless you're in that elite class, and then it's a whole different world. When you're born, it's not really so much born into money, but it's born into royalty. Basically, where pretty much anything in your life can be fairly handily planned for you. Where you could be a marginal law student, and within 18 months of graduating and passing the bar, you're a senior partner at such and such a firm. That stuff does happen.
But something to keep in mind, because this is America, I mean, it's not like royalty where you're stuck with a person. If a family goes long enough without having merit based uh, uh, fucking spawn, they'll get eaten by the families that do.
Yeah, pretty much. There has to.
It may
It
take
can't.
generations.
Yeah, and not too many generations though. There has to be something maintaining the aristocratic culture that they've come to expect um, as that. And that, net worth has something to do with that usually.
Well, I would say the list of families that have fallen out of the inner circle in Washington or New York is probably vast.
Right, right. But that almost doesn't really have a place in any discussion about the American dream or what that is, because it really is a subset. It doesn't matter how successful you are or what your net worth is. It just doesn't matter. In other words, Warren Buffett. Okay, everybody knows how much money he has. He could never be a part of that world because he's just not from it. You see what I'm saying? His net worth is not what his entrance is into that society. It's a very different culture that has to do with traceable histories of family to royalty and industrialists going back multiple generations, and you know what I mean. Warren Buffett will never be a Rockefeller,
Right.
In their eyes. They might say, okay, he can come to our parties because he's a billionaire, but when they look at him, they'll still think they're better than him.
Ironically, the same
uh,
would be said for Bill Gates, fucking Jerry Seinfeld, Bill Cosby. Even though these
all new
guys,
money. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That the class, the aristocratic class, and what the opportunities are for them, really have nothing to do with America. This is like age old tradition. It's not really about wealth; it's about power, and it's a very, very different thing. But if we're talking about whether somebody in this country, all things being equal, has more opportunity because his father has a white collar job versus a kid who grew up in a family where his father has a blue collar job, horseshit. The son of each of those two men is capable of any attainment of whatever they want to do without prejudice, but it is going to be up to them, and it's not going to. I'm not, like we said earlier. I mean, it doesn't mean people hear this stuff and they immediately want to commingle 40 fucking things into the discussion. It doesn't mean that you don't have to be in the right place at the right time. It doesn't mean you don't have to be fortunate. It doesn't mean that a little luck isn't involved and some maneuvering and a lot of different things don't have to line up. They do, but you got to be in a position to have that stuff go right for you, and there's no substitute for that other than not having a shitty attitude about what you can't have because life sucks and the government sucks, and and that whole mentality of thinking. You'll never find anybody who's been truly successful with anything, and I'm not just talking about financial success, that has that kind of an attitude. It just doesn't fit with it. I think one of my favorite sayings has been it really is one of my favorite sayings, and I say it a lot, and because I think it's so descriptive for what we're talking about. And that saying is that winners forget they're in a race; they just love to run. and that really sums up to me what embodies the American dream, and everybody that I know that has gotten the most that they can get out of their professional life. It doesn't really occur to them. It's not a destination; it's a lifestyle.
right.
But it's that way about anything. You talk to anybody who is fit, or whatever. they never talk about how they've been on this diet. I'm going on this diet, and I'm going to eat this and this and this until I lose 50 pounds or whatever.
Yes.
Those people lose it, even if they get it, and they gain it right back. And the reason is because, you know, anything worth doing in life, it's not a destination. You know what I mean? It's just, you do it because it's what you do, and the end result ends up being a byproduct of that, and not just some interim goal, you know, to accomplish this, and then, you know, and then it's over.
Like, I can't disagree with anything that you've said. In the way that I see it, near what you said about forgetting that you're in the race, the thing that always rings through almost like a replay in my mind is that neither success nor failure is permanent. So if you have failed at something, there's nothing that's permanent about it. Or if you have achieved success, there's nothing that's permanent about it.
So,
The people
only as good as your last trade.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why it's the people in a certain position that you've seen that have busted their asses to get there. Because when you're in that position, if you don't bust your ass when you're in that position, you won't be there long. You know, you'll be replaced by a person worthy of that merit. Is how I view that. Now, can you and I just paint it with a broad stroke and say that's the way it goes for everything everywhere? You know, of course not. But what I can say with confidence is here you can find a place where it is. It's there.
I agree.
And you know, with that, we'll get a couple of last words and we'll get this thing buttoned up. But I know I've said a lot of things on this video that have been on my chest for a while, and a lot of things that I've wanted to share with my experiences, especially over the last couple of months. You know, a lot of changes.
You've had a lot of interesting experiences, that's for sure.
You know what's bizarre though, as I was going through them, all the little twists and turns, it didn't really seem like a bizarre or interesting experience. It was, and I don't want to, and I'm not saying it just to blow smoke up your ass. It wasn't actually like as if I was in a race. It was just like running.
Sure. Yeah.
And
I think it's that way for, you know, my experiences of where I've kind of come from and to where I am now has been very different than yours, and everybody's are different. I don't think that's really it's a question of what business you're in or what you do, but that's definitely going to be the common thread for sure.
Yeah. You know, that I would never, you know, just because I say the whole thing about running, you know, I would never for a moment believe that I'm somehow a thoroughbred. But, you know, I feel like I'm fortunate enough to work with some, you know, like, but man, the thing is though, I can't imagine not running now. You know, I don't know what I would do with myself. I love my work. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy the challenge. And I can't imagine not having a challenge.
Me either.
I would, you know, I wouldn't want to be able to wake up in the morning and just have the wad of cash fall on my lap. I don't know. I just like what I do. I'm fortunate in that. Very fortunate.
I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah.